sorry to be presenting slightly formally like this, but I've got some slides. I think it was easier to be up here. Anyway, thanks Sam, thanks to Fawcett, and thanks to Anushka. What I'm going to be doing is talking about public opinion on the EU referendum, and as far as I can, drawing out some of the kind of interesting gender differences. And I'm drawing on what we've done at BritainThinks, as well as the kind of wealth of published data that there is. So, I'm going to start just with kind of 5 points, really, that I'm going to be making as I go through. And the first thing to say is this: you might not think it when you talk to people, but it is, I think, quite an exciting race, because it really is neck and neck. And I'll show you in a minute what the poll of polls looks like, and it is incredibly close. What that means is that actually that is a kind of significant improvement, a real success for Leave, because historically Leave has been trailing behind over many, many years. So in the last year or so, they've made a lot of headway, and I would say, still have considerable momentum. What else? What do we see when we look at what lies behind those figures? We see that the people that are in favour of Leave are rather more likely to turn out than the people who are not. They're also firmer in their conviction. They are more likely to believe what they believe and feel very sure about that. And this correlates very strongly, as I'll show, with age. So the older you are, the more likely you are to support Leave. What we also find is that the public, and this is a general point, to be fair, this is not just about women, the public generally feel very disengaged from this debate and are really struggling to kind of take an interest in it. And women in particular are struggling. But what we find when we look at the different messages and how well they're landing again is that the Leave message, particularly on immigration, and I'll come on to that, seems to have more traction than the messages that the Remain camp are putting up. And this disengagement is most strongly felt, therefore, by Remain leavers, and in particular young women, and I'll spend a little while talking about young women and where they fit in. And then, the final point really is that, as Anushka has already said, women, I think, are going to be really critical in this vote. What women end up doing may well be what decides. And it's a curious thing, because I think when you look at the way the campaign is being conducted, you would not believe that women were so important, because it doesn't seem to me that many of the politicians, present company accepted, are taking much time or trouble to think about what women might be interested in this debate. Anyway, what I want to start by doing is, one of the things that we've done at BritainThinks is a citizens' jury that we ran for the BBC, which was screened a few weeks ago. Mark Easton did it, and I've just got a little clip from that, which I thought I'd start by showing you.
Across its long and troubled history, Lichfield Cathedral has often borne witness to a nation's divisions and its search for common ground. Thank you all for coming to Lichfield Cathedral, a building dripping with the artefacts of Britain and Empire. And we want you to think about Britain's relationship with Europe. First of all, come up with one word that comes to mind when I say European Union. None of our jury has made up their mind how they'll vote in the EU referendum. Many said they didn't yet know enough about the issues. Using clips from news reports, we asked first about identity, whether EU membership dilutes or enhances Britain's way of life.
You can be part of the EU, but also keep your own identity. And we've managed to do it for so many years as it is, so why can't we continue?
I think we've already submerged a little bit already.
How does that make you feel?
Sad, really.
British identity has been diluted, but I think quite positively, because it makes us more open to greater integration.
I still maintain a certain degree of my cultural roots whilst living in the UK and feeling part of Europe.
Our jury was also asked to consider the financial impact of EU membership.
All I've read, it costs something like £39 million per day to be in the EU, but we're not informed of, you know, what benefits we're getting or what we're getting back. I just feel quite ignorant to it all, you know, as to what we're informed, what we're told. 39 million, yeah.
When you think about it, 39 million, where does all that come from?
We are forgetting some of the major issues that are lying within this country, poverty within this country, homelessness within this country.
It benefits us because obviously if we come out of Europe we're going to have to pay more to deal with them, so the cost of stuff's going to have to go up.
If we do pull out of the EU, there'll be a lot of bad feelings, and like it would raise the prices for us. Not for us as like the general public, but where the businesses are, where the trading's done, and the deals that are made.
Our final discussion focused on whether the benefits of membership outweigh the loss of control in terms of British law and the UK border.
I think it's quite a positive thing that I could work anywhere, and a lot of my friends work in other European countries, and I think it's really good that we've got that passport to go all around.
The problem is that you're getting people coming over from Romania or Poland or other countries in the EU, very poor countries. They can come straight here, not necessarily having a job, and they can get benefits straight away. They've got free healthcare straight away.
There are people that have come from Poland that I know of who are doing jobs without being rude to British people that the younger people in our generation just won't do.
We're only small, and there's only so many that we can take before it sort of strains our resources to, you know, the point where we are one of the, you know, the countries that will be struggling.
I'm just wondering whether it is just safe to pull up that drawbridge now. Otherwise we will be completely sucked up and dried up, and Great Britain won't exist anymore.
You can't live in splendid isolation. I just don't think you can. I think we do need other countries.
I know it's been hard, but we are going to make you choose, as you will have to in the referendum when it comes. In our case, we're going to ask you a simple question. In or out? A narrow 9-7 victory for staying in, but our divided jury were in total agreement on one thing. They all wanted to learn more and think more before referendum day. Mark Easton, BBC News, Lichfield.
So that is a day-long citizens' jury condensed down to a few minutes. I mean, if I was putting a bet on it now, I think that kind of result is probably where we'll end up, but there's a long way to go. And if we look at the poll of polls, you can see how incredibly close it is. Really, really neck and neck. What we're seeing is that there's a bit of a difference, if anybody's into poll geekery, between telephone polls, who are more likely to put Remain ahead, and online, but they're both showing the same trajectory, which is a narrowing lead for Remain, which, you know, a couple of years ago, Remain had a huge lead. So, and there's a lot to play for, because what we see is that with just weeks to go, we have about 2/5 of the public who say that they still haven't made their minds up. And that rises to half of Conservative voters. And, you know, if you're looking at political background, I would say that Tory voters probably are more important because Labour voters are more likely to have made their mind up. What we also see, if you look at that narrowing of the lead there for Remain, so that they are neck and neck, you can also see the trajectory of how immigration has moved up the agenda at the same time, and there's a very clear correlation. And what the polls are telling us when we look at the different messages is that that immigration point is the thing that people are saying is the most likely to be persuading them one way or other at the moment. So, when we look at the different types of people and how their behaviour is panning out, what we see is that age is actually the single most important of all of the socio-democratic factors. So you can see there how that Remain just goes up and up as you move through the different age scales. Now, why does that matter? It matters because those are the people that turn out. So when we look at the groups, and I'll come on to talk about this a little bit more, the groups that matter, the groups that will decide, are younger people who are more likely to be Remain but may not turn out, and middle-aged people who are more likely to be undecided. Now, but it's just interesting just to focus a moment on why is it that those older people are more likely to be in favour of leave. And I think there are kind of three things that are worth focusing on and worth spending much time on. The first is that if you're older, you can remember life before the EU. So the idea of not being in the EU is not quite as scary as it is for people who have never known anything else. That group also are less persuaded by the economic arguments, and I'm sure Vicky will be talking about this later, but that older group of voters are less financially insecure, so they're much less persuaded by those arguments, and they have much greater fear and antipathy around immigration than younger voters do as well. So I think those are the main reasons why there is that huge differential. But there are other things as well. What we also see is that politics matter, as I've already suggested, so Tory voters are more likely to want to leave, by 20-point lead there, and actually you're more likely to be undecided too. White people are more likely to want to leave. Middle-class people are more likely to want to remain, and working-class people are more likely to want to leave. And as we said, the big thing about women is that their votes are kind of up for grabs, because they are the ones who are more likely to be undecided. When we look at how those attitudes break down, we see that leaners are more likely to turn out, significantly more likely to turn out, and interestingly, 10% more likely to feel really sure about their point of view. So there's much less to play for there. When we look at those particular groups then, just spending a little while on the Remain leaners, and this is particularly women, and particularly young women, what we find is that they feel that they really lack information. Doing focus groups last week, I was just telling somebody else the story earlier, doing focus groups this week, about 20 minutes into the focus group, one of the young women said, "Can I stop you for a minute? What's this Brexit thing that people keep talking about?" And she had not heard the expression before at all. And I said, "Well, does anybody else know?" And it turned out, and this has been the case, we've been checking in every focus group since, probably 2 or 3 people in every... I mean, men say that they do know. I don't know if they do or not. They don't admit they don't know. But 2 or 3 women in every focus group will say that they are not familiar enough with the arguments to even know what that term is. So you know, there's quite a lot to play for. They feel very detached. The things they would like to be hearing about are health, jobs, housing. These are the things that they care about, and these don't seem to feature in the debate at all. They find it really hard to get a grip of what's going on. It's all jargon, as I said. They feel it's not, you know, everyone's presenting very partial data to them. They're looking for a kind of reliable source. They genuinely don't know. This young woman, the main thing in this discussion is knowledge. I personally don't feel I have enough knowledge, and I'm not hearing enough to help me. And they also feel there's a kind of lack of passion, and very rational arguments are coming out of the Remain camp, whereas the Leave camp feels much more emotional. So, here are the 3 groups again. You've got the Leave leaners and what they look like. So they're older, they're working class, they're living in the Midlands and the North. The Remain leaners, who are young, who are more upmarket, who are university educated, and polarised, interestingly, in 2 areas, London and Scotland. And then the undecideds, who are women and kind of middle-aged, middle-income women, conservative voters, and living, interestingly, often in the north and east of England. So, yeah, Tory voters, the fact that there's this predominance of Tory voters, I think, with undecideds, shows how important the kind of battle between David Cameron and Boris is going to be over the coming weeks. And it's quite interesting when you look at that might give some optimism to the Remain camp, because what you see is that when you combine all of the people who are making the Remain arguments with all of the people who are making the Leave arguments, actually they apparently have more influence. But Boris's personal ratings are much higher, that he remains the most popular politician in Britain. So it remains to be seen whether or not he can really cut through on that. One of the big problems in this whole debate has been that Labour has not featured in it at all. Now, I know that's changed today. It'll be very interesting to see whether that has any impact. But what the people in my focus groups are saying is that, frankly, at the moment, this feels like a Tory party vanity project. They feel there are other agendas going on that are not to do with the EU referendum, it's to do with these 2 guys making their case for their own leadership. So both sides shouting out contradictory facts, and actually all they really care about is what happens with the leadership. And as I've said, already people are not really very clear about what Brexit means. So, in summary, I'll just go back to my list, because that's where I started, and where I'd kind of like to, well, hand over to the others with this thought in mind, which is really, I think, the challenge, if we take note of how important women voters are going to be in the final result, is when are we going to hear the campaigns actually addressing women? Thanks.